Hey there, Postal here. So today we are looking at the J7W3 Tier 10 Japanese multi-role fighter. Let's take a look. Alright, so what is this plane? What makes it so much different? Well, let's talk about the tech line that you've gone down to get here, or will be going down to get here, and then we'll talk about some of the differences of this particular plane from that line. For me, it was quite a difference once you get to these top tiers. So what is this line? It's the zero line. Historic, quintessential. When you think of Japanese fighter planes, most people tend to think of the Zeros first and foremost, kamikazes and things of that nature if you're American. I wanted to go down the Zero line, and to be honest, I'm a little bit disappointed with it. Don't get me wrong, obviously great turn fighters, pretty strong guns, to be honest. I think kind of underrated guns, but as a whole, they are very slow and ridiculously low altitude. I did keep this Tier 7 A7M, where's my pilot for it, as a keeper, just because it's a good plane in my opinion. At Tier 7, you still have a great maneuverability. You're still not to the point where you're running into too many jets or anything like that, so low altitude isn't the worst. But it's not, it's got a decent airspeed with it compared to the Zeros before it, and I just liked it. I needed to keep a Tier 7 fighter, and at the time I didn't have any other, so I kept it, and this is my Tier 7 turn fighter. I didn't keep anything before it just because most of the Zeros in this game are rendered obsolete just by somebody, going up to 4,000, 5,000 feet, right? Or keeping some speed. And so, yeah, it wasn't a difficult line to grind, but it wasn't necessarily an enjoyable line to grind. But then after this particular plane, you get yourself to the J7W1, which is a fairly significant difference. Really the only thing that's similar between this and the A7M or any of the Zeros before it is the altitude performance, and this still has a pretty decent jump up in altitude performance. I wasn't too fond of the J7WM, not because it was a terrible plane, just because I think the difference between the A7M before it and it was too great for me to come to terms with early on in the game, and the 30s were kind of frustrating on it. Very short range, 1900 feet. Yeah, they hit hard, but it just wasn't my playstyle, which is weird to say because I went from that to the J7W2, not expecting to necessarily like this plane because I wasn't overly fond of the W1 before it, but I fell in love with this plane, and a lot of it has to do with the guns, actually. What are the guns on this particular plane? They're 430s, but they've got slightly longer effective firing range, and that means a big difference. On top of that, they're significantly stronger as far as damage per second. 300 damage per second. These are Tier 10 guns, which isn't uncommon on a Tier 9 plane, but they make a huge amount of difference. Where on the Tier 8 you'd hit a couple times, it didn't quite do enough damage to take out the enemy sometimes, and then you'd be stuck trying to, dogfight when you're not the best maneuverability. You've got good maneuverability, but not the best. And so you'd be just caught in awkward situations. You get to Tier 9 here, and Tier 10 to follow, and your guns hit so hard that you don't need to worry about dogfighting. You just need to worry about hitting. So that makes a huge difference on this plane, where the previous plane, kind of struggled to take things out. Didn't quite have enough airspeed, didn't quite have enough altitude performance, the guns didn't quite hit hard enough. So it was just under the cusp of being a good plane, and this is my opinion, my playstyle. I got to the W2, I bought it only because it was on discount during March of Nations, only because I'm a cheapo and I try to save as much silver as I can. I got it, hopped in it, and fell in love with it right from the get-go. And then you look at the J7W3. I was actually excited to get the J7W3, and you're going to look. Everything gets nothing but better with the W3, except for the guns. But the guns were good enough to begin with. You're going to see it in today's gameplay. They're better than good enough. They're some of the strongest in the game, and they're in a multi-role. These are basically heavy fighter guns on a light fighter platform. Because in reality, this plane is a light fighter. They tell us it's a multi-role because they decided to put bombs on it, but these bombs are kind of worthless. They do 4,400 damage. I mean, they'll help you flip a sector if you need just a little bit more points to flip a sector and you can't kill anything in the air. But really, you're going to be killing most of your stuff, getting most of your capture points from destroying aircraft. Try to talk about this succinctly. So we go from this tier 9 to tier 10, which has more altitude performance, better maneuverability, better airspeed, and of course more hit points. Doesn't look a lot different, does it? But it does a lot different. And I think at the time, I probably should even check my service on this. At the time, I just put something in that was cheap to put in it. I did put the engine armor. I think I just put it in because it was something that I'd already bought, but maybe I did keep it. Like any of the Japanese planes, this plane tends to catch on fire pretty quickly. It's got a rear engine, so its rear engine's going to go out pretty easily. I've of course buffed the maneuverability with the lightweight wing frame. I should probably make this at least improved, but I'll have to do that when I've got silver. Right now I'm grinding for the 228, so wanting to stock out the 228, and I don't have the silver for it. I did put the long gun barrels on this particular plane, and the reason being is because, and you're going to notice it in game, you don't really need a lot of burst length on it. You've got enough burst, you've got enough damage that's really not a big deal. Getting a little bit more out of your firing range is really helpful with this plane, because you can start getting to an okay-ish altitude. You can start hitting things that are at a medium to almost high altitude if you've got your range up a little bit. Thanks to the Russian bombers in game now, you can actually do some damage to some bombers. But you're going to see you can do a significant amount of damage to ground pounders with these guns. It's really quite awesome. And you can dogfight with almost anything in the game at this particular tier. Remember, you're in the jet age, so there's not a lot of maneuverability going on out there. Let's take a look and compare this particular plane to the other multi-roles in the game. It's going to be pretty significant difference. So the closest one you're going to see on maneuverability is going to be the F-84F, 10.7 turn time. We look at our J7W3, and we're at 10.2, so you can still outmaneuver that, but everything else that you're going to be looking at as far as multi-roles is concerned is going to have terrible turn radius. Maneuverability on the BVP 215, just bad. We all know that, but that makes up for it in its altitude performance being relatively good. 215, don't make me laugh, right? So the maneuverability on this, 12.2 seconds, so a full 2 seconds more. So you've got to remember, your bread and butter is really going to be your turning ability. You've got good airspeed. This is 13 seconds. It's like the worst in the game. Oh my goodness, why? I think the Hunter should be relatively okay. 12.2. Never mind. That's right up there too. So you've got two that are down there, and this is still going to be the turniest of those. And remember, we're talking the jet age, so you're going to be able to outturn like things like Swifts and things like that, I'm assuming, right? Yes. So you can outdo Swifts. You can outdeal a lot of the light fighters that are out there. Not that you're going to see a lot of them because they're high altitude, but you're going to be able to do a lot of damage down low. Even versus things like Yaks. A Yak 30 can outmaneuver you, but if you can get your guns on target, just a couple hits against a light fighter will tear up a light fighter. So think about it, you're doing 1200 damage a second. There's not a light fighter in the game that has 1200 hit points. There's not a there's not a multi-role in the game that has 1200 hit points. So you're going to be able to kind of eviscerate a lot of the light and multi-role fighters out there. And so the maneuverability that you have is perfect for getting your guns on target as quickly as possible and knocking them out. You've got a decent amount of airspeed now. You're going to see yourself up above 500 miles an hour, from time to time. You're definitely going to be above 400 miles an hour pretty often, and you're going to want to use that to get to where you need to be. But go to a sector, own that sector, and go from there. If you're lucky enough to get to a map that has a military base in the center, or just nothing but no mining facilities, basically is what I'm saying, you're going to do very, very well in this particular plane. Again, those bombs are going to be available to kind of just help flip a zone when you need it to flip it, but otherwise, they're there for looks. You want to set up your pilot. You want to set up your pilot like you will most of your Japanese pilots. And firefighter is definitely a need almost for any Japanese plane. If you haven't learned that by the time you've got to tier 10, it's probably been a very long grind for you. But firefighter kicks in when you're maneuvering. You're in a Japanese fighter, you're going to be maneuvering all the time. So if you catch on fire, you're able to knock yourself out of fire pretty darn quickly. It's a very, very helpful perk. Because I want my guns to be hitting target, I've gone for Marksman 1 and Marksman 2. I haven't really thought about what I want my next skill to be. It'll probably be something that helps my maneuverability even more, so maybe aerodynamics expert. We'll see. But yeah, so that's enough talk about the plane, about how I got to it, and let's go ahead and hop into some battle. Alright, so we've got our top tier Japanese multi-role, J7W3. Let's see what we can do with it. And being top dog, we definitely want to own everything. I have gone for the bombs, leaving the bombs on this particular plane, if only because it's pretty freaking quick anyway. So I wanted to have that ability to still flip things as much as this pseudo multi-role can do. So we're going to be hanging out down here because that's what you do in the Japanese plane. And we need to be wiggling around because, again, that's what you need to do. We've got Gurgle. Seriously? Is that your name? I mean, who am I to argue with names? Anybody's seen my freaking name? It's pretty redonkulous. Nope, overheated. The worst thing you can do. No, that's not the worst thing you can do in this plane, but it's so dissatisfying when you overheat the guns, because these guns hit so hard. You just want to hold down the button because you want them to hit, right? Shall I be cheeky? Guess I shall. I'm gonna go ahead and try to get up to this 212, TU12. Got F-94D though on the way up, so there we go. Pretty risky move there, right? If he had come directly at me, very easily could have blasted me in the face with those rockets. We don't need that happening. What I love about these guns is they're just so ridiculously fast firing. They're still pretty slow as far as the trajectory is concerned, so you do need to aim kind of far out. Of course, he's not turning like I thought he was. Ah well. But they're very, very fast firing, a lot more so than some of the other 30s out there, or some of the 30s that you might have been used to previously. Hello? I guess we'll get Gurgle. Is this Gurgle again? It is. And that means you can do stuff like this, where you just hold down the trigger because you know you're going to kill him once you're on target. You're going against ground pounders here, right? Like, you should not be able to tear them up that easily. And hello, radio tower. And yet, you've got heavy planes guns. I mean, seriously. That's just silly. So I'm just going to own the center here. I'm assuming that my military base will own everything I need my military base to own. Why a defense aircraft from the next sector is here, I don't know. It distracted me sufficiently. Come back here. No, you son of a biscuit. It's twice now he's gotten away. I really could use the ability to kill some stuff. Oh, thank you. Thank you for obliging. I mean, I know you've got those Aidens, but you basically have 4 Aidens on the front here, right? And those are pretty darn strong. They're like every other 30 basically in the game. You're going to be doing above 300 damage per shot per gun. And oh, I forgot my. I was like, why am I not turning as well as I would have liked to? But you're on the front of a highly maneuverable multi-role plane. A multi-role plane in name only. This is a fighter. It's off of a fighter line. There's a reason why this is actually a viable multi-role off of a fighter in the game. Whereas the BVP, you know, as a fighter coming off of those FW190s, I don't really feel like those are lend themselves to that particular line. It seems a little disjointed in my opinion. Let's get our boost on here and see if we can stick with him. Got my engine cooling going. And we are able to stick with him a little bit here. And I'll get back to my thought. 212, let's see if we can stick with him, since this is the only thing that's really over here. Anyway, so the BVPs are great planes in their own right, but they just don't feel like they're meant to come off of the FW190 line. Oh, hello. Hello, sir. I'm up in MiG territory. That's pretty freaking high up, isn't it? Yeah, I can still outmaneuver a MiG up here. Anyway, BVP really kind of suddenly is like a completely different playstyle. This going at the tier 10 from the tier 7 A7M is definitely a different playstyle. Thank you. But by the time you get back up here to tier 10, you feel right back at home. With much better guns. Did I seriously ram him? No freaking way. Way! I don't feel like that was a ram, but hey, what do I know? So let's get ourselves down to a reasonable altitude so we can gain some of our hit points back. And we'll go back after these guys. Who's that multi-roll? That multi-roll. Oh, well. Anyway, so to finish my thought, the multi-rolls on this particular line are highly maneuverable. Yeah, they're less maneuverable than a 0, but, you know, what isn't less maneuverable than a 0? So the tier 8 kind of seems like a drop-off from the tier 7 as far as maneuverability is concerned, but you've gained a lot of that back by the time you get to this tier 10. And you've got all kinds of great guns. As this video is clearly showing. Let's get back to the center and hope we can hang on to that. Using all my cooling and all my boost. I know, buddy, I know. Chillax. Take your job very seriously.
There's a heavy storm here. Unable to proceed. Returning to base. Do you copy?
Dang it. Ooh, I didn't even realize there was another J7W3. Oh, come on. Too much going on here. Thank you. Next. Now let's get down here. Got Felix I really didn't. How did I not notice that guy's name the first time? I'm hitting the air brakes here so that way I don't plummet into the freaking ground. And we've owned the center here again, so that's exactly what we wanted to do. Let's get this W3. He's a little bit higher up than he probably wants to be. He's on a lot less hit points than us, and we've got the angle. And I guess we didn't even need the angle, considering somebody else got the kill there. So, and there you go. We were able to hang on to the center, and when you're the top dog, that's all you need to do. Not too shabby before dying there. I absolutely love this plane. It's not a difficult plane to play, to be honest, and it's just so much fun. Let's head on back. Alright, so we got 13 frags, relatively, pretty solid game there, I'd say. We had a lot of things going for us, though, so do keep in mind before we start drooling too much. We had two U-12s, which is very nice because they're at an altitude that the W3 can actually go at. And everybody just kind of kept coming to the center there. We didn't really have to deal with either of these guys. They stayed up nice and high, and if they decided to come down, we'd probably own them, I would think, whether they're human or bots, unless they're hitting you from half a mile away before you have that ability to realize what's going on. But one of the nice things about the J7W3 is, like so many of the turn fighters that are out there, if you get hit once, don't just sit there in a freaking line. Start turning, right? When you start turning, they're not going to be able to get you a second time. And if they're, being a pain in the butt and zooming away, so be it. That's what, if they're smart, that's what they're going to do. But very often you run into humans that, or bots even, that try to turn with you, and you're going to be able to out-turn them. So solid overall game in the J7W3. Again, pretty good matchmaking, so to speak. Didn't really have any of the super high planes to go against. You will run into situations from time to time where this particular plane just doesn't have the altitude performance to compete, and that's where you're looking at this altitude performance. You saw I was in the yellow pretty early on, but it's to be expected if you've gone down the Japanese line. If you've made it down this far, you should be used to that, right? But this is just a fun plane. It's got enough things different with it that it's not just your average turn fighter. It is a turn fighter. Don't get me wrong. But what makes a difference with this and the Tier 9 before it is these awesome guns. There's no other light fighter in the game that can tear up ground pounders like this light fighter can. I mean, I know it's not a light fighter in the game, but it kind of really is. I dropped the bombs once, didn't I? And then that was the end of that. So anyway, thank you so much for joining me. I really enjoyed this particular plane. I hope you enjoyed the battle. I'll definitely be flying it a lot more, especially on stream this Saturday. So thank you, and I hope you have a great day.